Welcome to fourth grade history. This is for lesson 148, and we're looking at pages 214 and 215, and then the comprehension check on the top of 216 is what you'll answer after this. Let me see. The lighting seems to be bad. So, but just for homework, make sure that you read pages 216 to 217 at the comprehension check. Do the chapter checkup CCU 17 on page 221. Do numbers 21 through 26. So that's the homework for this lesson. And so we're going to be looking at some key people and some happenings in the very beginning, where we're at in World War II. So I'm going to ask a couple questions, and we'll go into our what we've been talking about. So, who was one of the cruelest dictators the world has ever known? Joseph Stalin, very good. And what country was he the leader of? The Soviet Union. Okay, and who was the fascist dictator of Italy? Benito Mussolini. Who was the Nazi dictator of Germany after World War I? Adolf Hitler. Okay, and what general became more powerful than the emperor in Japan? That was Tojo. Okay, and from yesterday, what country did Hitler demand that it give a piece of their land to Germany? That was Poland. All right, and then what two countries said they would protect Poland from Germany if attacked? England and France. Okay, and so at this point in the war, Germany has conquered almost all of Europe. England is the only country left of Europe that Germany has not conquered. And so they are just, Great Britain has begged for help from the U.S. And so at that time, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was our president. And he was having the factories of the country make war supplies, and they were strengthening our Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, all of our armed forces that we had at the time. And many of our guns and war supplies were either sold or loaned to Great Britain. And so, and there were other countries that were also struggling. President Roosevelt called our nation the great arsenal of democracy. And so that was something that we were a big part of the war efforts, but we still were not in the war yet. And so Germany attacks England, and because England is an island, they couldn't just go over on land like they had with all the other countries. And so he had to come at it from a different approach. And so he started dropping bombs on London, well, anywhere, the main cities, but London would have been one of the places that he dropped the bombs on. But he had his planes fly over and drop bombs, and this was called the Battle of Britain. And so they were continuously under attack. And if you've read, maybe you've read some books, maybe the Narnia books, that actually the very beginning of that, because even though those are a fictional book, they are set in England, and they are set around this time of the Battle of Britain, because that's why the kids were sent away. They were sent to the countryside, and a lot of kids were either sent, a lot of children were either sent to the countrysides, the rural areas where there weren't as many people, and it wasn't as much chance of getting bombed, or there were even some that were sent to America. There's another fictional story, but if you've maybe Sadie has read some of the American Girl stories, the one about Molly, they bring a British foreign exchange student to their home, and she tells them about these the bombings, and how they would have raid drills. So they would have the sirens go off, and everyone had to get in a bunker, and they had to hide. And it was just a drill. It was like our fire drill, but they would have these so people would be ready and know where to go. Well, the bombs that would go off would kill hundreds and even thousands of people, and it was awful. But Germany was trying to weaken England so that they would so that Hitler could take them over. But the England's Air Force fought them back. They were able to fight against them, and so Great Britain wasn't conquered. The U.S. didn't have to enter the war at this time, and so it was kind of a reprieve, a little bit of a break for them. But there's something else that happens, and the Russians were a part of, had an alliance with Germany that they wouldn't invade each other for 10 years. But Germany was planning a surprise attack on the Russians. Now, he didn't plan this very well because he planned for winter time and in December. And in Russia, it's very cold. There's lots of snow. And so when they started to invade, the soldiers were freezing. Their food was frozen. Their tanks would freeze and their trucks. They weren't able to go very far because everything would freeze. They didn't have warm clothing to wear. And so it wasn't very well planned out. But so that's really one of the things that helped the most. But England had agreed to help them, so they did help some. They had asked the U.S., but we didn't involve ourselves yet. And so this was the main reason that Germany went back to Germany, the German soldiers, is that they were fighting a losing battle, mostly because of the weather. It was kind of like when we had in our Civil War, the winter of 1777 was, 1777, the winter at Valley Forge was very brutal. We lost soldiers because of the winter time, and they didn't have sufficient clothing or shoes and stuff. And so that can always be a part of a battle. Is weather could be part of it. And so, but something that we're gonna hit on, that what the names of these are. And so in World War I, we had the Central Powers against the Allied powers. Now we've got the Axis powers. The Axis powers and the Allies we still have the Allies, okay? So the Axis powers were Germany, Italy, and Japan. And so these three were fighting the war, and Russia kind of turns to be on the Ally side at this point, but the fighting took place on 3 different continents, on Asia, Europe, and Africa. And so you had your Italy was trying to, and Hitler and Mussolini were working on controlling Africa and the natural resources there. That's always been a hot spot for that. Hitler led the war with invading all of Europe, and then Japan was working on Asia and some of the islands in the Pacific. And so this was the war was not over. It was just beginning, really. there were so many things that had to happen. We really, all three of these countries would need to be defeated in order for this war to come to an end. And so at that time, the most powerful allies were Great Britain and the Soviet Union. There were other smaller countries that were on our side, but they weren't strong. They more lended soldiers to the cause. And then the U.S. would soon join, and General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who would be the president, the next president, he would be the commander in chief. He would be over all of the armies of the Allied powers. There has to be someone in charge. And so when the U.S. finally entered the war, they put him in charge because he was a general before he became president, and they had him lead the way for that. And so so what I want you to do is go ahead and read that over again. I know that you read that for homework, but read it again, 214 to 215, and then answer the comprehension check on the next page, those 5 questions on a piece of paper. And then for the homework for the lesson, so if you get done with that and you still have some time and you want to do the homework, so you're going to read 216 to 217. Let's see. Oh, okay, so it's actually only 2, victory comes at last. So basically you're just finishing that little paragraph that falls right underneath the picture. And so you're not reading the rest of it. We'll finish that. We'll read that tomorrow. And then, yeah, we'll pick that up on the next lesson. And so then do numbers 21 to 26 from your chapter checkup 17, page 221. Do those questions, and you can do those on the same sheet of paper that you did the comprehension check. Just mark both of them. So just, you could do, the comprehension check 17D, or you can just say page 216 and then do those 5 questions, and then below that you can write CCU 17, page 221, and then do numbers 21 to 26. So as long as you have that labeled, we'll be all good. And so we will see you in the next lesson.